Behind me are the woods from which Easy Company launched their attack on Foix on the morning of January 13th, 1945. It's difficult to really get a good sense of what it looked like in 1945. Number one, because I can't actually go up into the woods to the top of the hill where they would have been because it's private property, but also because the woods don't exist the way that they did at that time. The woods actually originally extended out a little further, maybe another 100, 200 yards from where they are now, and it was from that point that Easy Company launched their attack. So it would have been actually, in fact, I'll try to turn and give you a sense of that. Right here, there's a kind of the crest of the hill, and that's where it would have been. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening here. In the last couple of days, Easy Company has had to clear the woods behind me of Germans. On the 10th, they lose a number of men, including Skip Muck and Alex Penkala, who are killed by a direct hit to their foxhole. And now they're prepared for the attack on Foix. So Dick Winters is the acting commander of 2nd Battalion, and he's given orders to launch an attack at 0900 on the morning of the 13th. He protested, saying that they should launch the attack at first light, but he was denied. And so the plan called for machine guns to lay down a base of fire while the platoons from left to right, 1st Platoon, 2nd Platoon, and 3rd Platoon, attacked Foix with support from I Company and some others. So the obvious thing that most people think of when it comes to the attack on Foix is the leadership problem. Just before that, we have the scene in Band of Brothers where we see the company first sergeant, the highest ranking enlisted man in the company, Carwood Lipton, going to Dick Winters, the acting CO of the battalion, and talking about his concerns about Lieutenant Dyke, the company commander. That conversation did happen, and it wasn't, however, just about Lieutenant Dyke. You see, Easy Company's problems with leadership went beyond just their CO. They had a problem at the platoon level as well. The 3 platoon leaders in the attack on Foix, only one of them had any experience as a combat platoon leader. Just before this, they had had one officer who was suspected of shooting himself in the hand to get out of combat. They had lost Buck Compton to what was diagnosed as trench foot, but was probably combat exhaustion, what we know today as PTSD. They had lost Lieutenant Peacock, who had gone home because of a lottery in which he was drawn 2nd place. Initially, it was Captain Nixon who won that lottery, but just like they show in Band of Brothers, he said, "I've already seen the States." And so they gave it to Peacock, who got 2nd in that. So leading the platoons during the attack on Foix, 1st Platoon was under command of Lieutenant Jack Foley. Foley had briefly been an assistant platoon leader, but then because of the loss of so many officers, he was thrust into command of 1st Platoon. This was his first combat as a platoon leader. He had been in ROTC back in Western Pennsylvania and had just come to Easy Company in time for the Battle of the Bulge. 2nd Platoon, which would attack up the center, didn't even have any officers. After they lost Buck Compton, 1st Sergeant Carwood Lipton was now in command of 2nd Platoon. And then 3rd Platoon was the only one that had an experienced officer. Ed Shames had been an NCO in 3rd Battalion when they dropped into Normandy on D-Day. A couple of weeks after the invasion of Normandy, he received a battlefield commission, the first man in 3rd Battalion to receive a battlefield commission. And as was normally the case, they moved him to a different company, in this case a different battalion. He was moved to Easy Company and he took command of 3rd Platoon. So he was the only experienced platoon leader they had during the attack. So the attack itself called for a 3-pronged attack by Easy Company. 1st Platoon under Foley would attack around the left. It was kind of a flanking maneuver. It was on this side of the hill. And, contrary to what you see in Band of Brothers, it was always planned that way. It wasn't something that Dyke came up with on the fly when he panicked. It was always planned that way, not from the other side of town, but on the left side of the attack. 2nd platoon would go right down the middle, down the hill, and then Shames with 3rd platoon was on the other side of the N30 coming in to Foix from that direction. The attack starts out pretty good. Dick Winters is at his CP right here at the top of the hill where the cows are at the edge of the woods, and he decided he was going to watch the attack because of the concerns about leadership. And he said that the attack started out really good. They were in a good tight formation. They were moving together. Everything was going exactly according to plan. And then all hell broke loose. They get about halfway into Foix. 1st platoon's going around on the left, and they're finding they can't find any good cover anywhere. They had actually at one point taken a building along their attack route, and there were some Germans in there that tried to surrender, but then they reached in to try and grab their weapons, and Foley said they took them all out. But they strung out, and they were trying to find cover behind trees, but the trees weren't any wider than your hand, they said. And so Percani, for example, is firing from behind a tree, but his butt's sticking out, and he gets shot in the butt because that was what the Germans could see. Webb was another one. You see Webb in Band of Brothers behind a cart looking toward the enemy, and you see that scene where Sergeant Martin comes running up to him, which really did happen, but Webb was behind a tree, not behind a cart. And Martin said that he thought that Webb was still there, and he comes up and he grabs Webb to tell him they need to get back, and he sees that Webb's been shot right between the eyes and killed. So this is where they freeze up. What happens is Lieutenant Dyke may have been wounded in the shoulder. Some Easy Company men say he was shot in the shoulder about the time that he froze up. But he also had lost sight of Foley's 1st platoon on the left. If you look at the terrain here, and it's kind of hard to see, but when I show you some of the drone shots, it'll be easier to see. It slopes up, and so if we assume that Dyke was on the other side of the crest of the hill, which he must have been, and 1st platoon was on this side, Dyke couldn't see them. And so he loses sight of them. He may or may not have been shot, but he freezes. He panics. That everybody agrees on. And so he, along with members of 2nd and 3rd platoon, are hiding behind these haystacks. And Winters is on the phone trying to get a hold of him, trying to tell him he's got to move because this attack has to keep moving. There are windows in multiple buildings that they said any one of them could have machine guns or snipers in them. And some of them did. And they were pinned down by a sniper, they said, behind these haystacks. And so he's trying to get him to move. And finally, Winters says that he grabbed his M1 and he took about 3 steps in the direction of Lieutenant Dyke because he was going to run out there and take command himself. And unlike how you see in Band of Brothers, it wasn't the voice of Colonel Sink that stopped him. It was Winters himself. Winters said that he thought to himself after taking a couple steps, now wait a second, I'm in command of this battalion. I can't go out there. And so he said he turned around and the first officer he saw was Ronald Spears. It wasn't that he already had Spears in mind for the command. If he did, he never acknowledged that. He said in his book, he said, I just turned around and Spears was the first guy that I saw. Now, Spears had been wounded back in Holland. He had been a platoon leader in Dog Company. And various sources that I've read, some say that he was still a platoon leader in Dog Company. Others say that when he came back from Holland, he hadn't been reassigned to a position. Seems to me with the lack of leadership in the 2nd Battalion, he obviously would have had a role somewhere. So he does exactly what you see in the miniseries. He tells Spears, he says, get out there, relieve Dyke, take command and lead that attack on in. And that's what Spears does. Now, unlike how you see things in Band of Brothers, which I totally understand because it's a TV show and for the sake of time, they've got to condense things. The attack by Easy Company took 6.5 hours before they had taken Foix. 6.5 hours. And they were then actually pulled out of Foix, and other men went in to take over. And right after Easy Company was pulled out, the Germans actually counterattacked. And a day or two later, there was another counterattack in which the Germans actually briefly retook Foix, and other men had to take it from them. By that point, though, Easy Company had moved on to their next attack, which was Noville. But while they were in Foix, they experienced the famous incident with the sniper that killed Mellett, and Heron, among others. And that was when Shifty Powers went to work. the town of Foix now, and one of the more famous incidents in the aftermath of the attack on Foix was the incident with the German sniper and Shifty Powers. The sniper had taken out several men, including one soldier named Mallet, who was killed in easy company. And so Shifty Powers, who was one of the crack shots in easy company, took cover behind this building right here. And while Carwood Lipton ran from that building across the street to behind this one right here, that distracted the sniper, and Shifty was able to take his M1 and aim and take him out. Two men from Easy Company later on said that when they found the sniper, when they went up there, he'd been shot right between the eyes by Shifty. And I think one of the soldiers was quoted in the book Band of Brothers as telling Stephen Ambrose, it just doesn't pay to be shooting at Shifty Powers. Now, there's a video on YouTube with some of the cast members from Band of Brothers, along with Captain Dale Dye, who played Colonel Sink, standing in this spot. And when Dale Dye is telling them about this incident, he points to that window, but the cameraman looks over instead at the top of the church. And so that has led to a lot of people being under the false impression that the sniper was in that church, and he wasn't. He was in that window, and you can actually see, we'll take a look at it, the damage around the window that remains to this day. Before they were eventually moved to places like Henri Chapelle and Ham Luxembourg, 2,700 American soldiers who died in and around Foix, including the members of Easy Company, would have been buried in this field behind me. Just over the hill, maybe 200-300 yards, you can see the tops of the flags that mark the German cemetery. They were almost side by side.